Today I'd like to present you with a different scenario than most of you have probably seen or heard about the banking system. My purpose here is to get you thinking differently about how money works in our current system. Now, in previous presentations, I have mentioned a fellow named Mariner Eccles, who used to be the head of the Federal Reserve. And in a testimony before Congress in 1941, Mr. Eccles bluntly said, "If there were no debts in our money system, there wouldn't be any money." Because we operate in a debt-based system. We have to borrow all of our money into existence at interest. And one of the things I've been reading, there's a wonderful book called Rethinking Money by Bernard Lietaer. Bernard Lietaer was the architect, or is known as the architect of the Euro money system, so he should know what he's talking about. And there's this wonderful quote that addresses that in the book, where Mr. Lietaer says that there's a problem with trying to pay the interest on a loan. He says, although new loans are being created, and remember, whenever we take out a loan, we borrow money into existence. That's how we create money here. Although new loans are being created, the interest on the principal is not. Nowhere in the system is this additional money created. This gives rise to scarcity, which in turn creates competition to acquire the extra money to cover the loan's interest. Essentially, to pay back interest on a loan requires using someone else's principal. Now think about that. When we borrow money into existence at interest, we create the principal, we create the money for the principal. But then there's interest on top of that, but the only money we've created is the principal. And so what that does is it throws us into competition, because in order for me to pay off the interest on my loan, according to his statement, I need to use some of your principal, which makes you short in your ability to pay back your loan, which means that in the system as it is, when we borrow the principal and also create interest, and we run short in the system, it forces us to compete for the principal to pay back each of our loans, but somebody has to lose. And when we lose, that forces somebody, perhaps one of you, into default, perhaps into bankruptcy, and perhaps into poverty. And that's the way the system works. And there's a further problem in that as we pay back the principal, we start canceling out the money. Again, we pay it back to the bank. The money we created gets canceled out. We still owe the interest. We still owe the principal. But as we pay down that principal, we start canceling out, or basically destroying the money supply that we actually need for our survival and to pay off the bill. And when I think of that, there's always something just feels a little wrong about that. You know what I mean? Feel the same thing here. As we start losing our principal, it forces us into productivity. The money gets scarce. How are we going to pay the bill? How are we going to pay off the loan? Then we have to become more productive to create more money to be able to pay off the principal so that we don't default on our loan. And as we increase our productivity, it requires more money. To expand your business, to be more productive, it usually takes more money to make the world go around. So you have to borrow more money, which increases the debt. And as you borrow more principal and you increase the interest and owe more debt, it forces that debt up to the point where at some point the economy can no longer absorb that debt. And when that happens, we fall back into a recession, or some people would call it a correction. But the end result is that a lot of us will have to default on our loans, declare bankruptcy, and perhaps fall into poverty. And an observation I would like to make is that in this scenario, every time the cycle repeats, more people become poor. And I would like to speculate that in this process, the banks are creating poverty faster than the helping agencies and welfare agencies can help people get out of poverty. The debt-based system is stacked against helping people get out of poverty and be whole and be able to contribute to their society and function on their own. So from this, I would speculate that you could say the banks are in the business of redistributing wealth to themselves, because as the productivity expands and the banks make more loans, they make money on the expansion, and when that collapse starts, they make money on the collapse by seizing your house, your car, your business, your wealth to satisfy the debt. Now, if you look at the history, the past 100 years, starting in 1910, the longest we've gone without a recession is 10 years. We've had a recession every 1 to 10 years for the past 100 years. That would place the next recession sometime between now and the year 2020. That's coming up pretty quick, isn't it? So, the thing I want you to remember is that we're faced with a dilemma. We can delay the next recession by increasing our productivity, but if we increase our productivity, it basically brings on the next recession. So how can we increase our productivity to delay the next collapse? And once that collapse comes, how many of us will fall into poverty as a result? And that's the question I think we need to take a look at in terms of how do we deal with the money system? What do we need to do? What do we need to change so that we can avoid or at least soften the effects of the next recession?